All right, guys, I think we're live. Just post a link. Wait a couple minutes for people to hop on in. And we'll get the show on the road. If anyone's around and wants to say hello, please go for it in the live chat. I know I just started it, so I'm not anticipating anyone to be there just yet. X to load. Yo, what's up, Krizak? Is there any network issues or can you hear me fine? Let me know. Just because depending on that, sort of depend on what I go over and whatnot. So, and my Wi-Fi is like straight to zero, faster than Bitcoin. So everything's good. Okay, good. So, yeah, it's weird. I mean, not even like my computer's old. My phone's not having any issues with the Wi-Fi, so I'm like probably something related to my computer hardware, but I'm not uh I'm not an expert on computer hardware. I have some ideas on what it might be, but I'm too lazy to try to fix it. All right, cool. All right, we'll get started here in a second. I'll talk a little bit about the markets. I mean, you guys can see how slow it is just like when I click a chart. Yeah, we'll get started here in just a minute. Wi-Fi is like, I have an idea on how to fix it. Or not a fix, but a workaround. Let me try something. If I disconnect for a second, if it still works after I do this, let me know. All right, I'm gonna do it right now. I'm still here. If you can hear me, Grizak, or anyone else, let me know. I think this fixed this. If I'm still here, please let me know. All right, well, hopefully I'm still live. All right, we're gonna get started here. I'm just trying some random shit to see if the stream's still working. I know this is not the best hour. I'm actually gonna try to do these streams more so like, you know, minus 10 hours from now type deal. So, no, the timing is pretty bad, but all right, cool. You're good. All right, cool. All right, let's get started here. No, like I said, I know the timing isn't the best, but it is what it is. And or sorry, if anyone has questions during this, anyone has any, it doesn't have to be a question, it could just be a comment like, hey, go look at this or whatever. and wants me to go over anything, please let me know. More than happy to do so. So let's talk a little about what's going on. And I did a stream yesterday, and I talked a little bit about what I was thinking in terms of I didn't think Bitcoin was expensive, but I talked about this case where hey, we could go sideways for a while, and I talked a bit about hey, like at 93, we're starting to see some rejection. Also, we saw that Sailor had bought, right, with an average of like 92. So it wouldn't surprise me if like either this leg or maybe even like this price action was Sailor, to be honest. Like clearly he was one of these two because he bought at 92. Maybe he was sort of the buyer here if I'm being honest. Like maybe he bought on Tuesday and then sort of bled into Wednesday and then the market nuked out. So I noticed both those things, right? 93 price couldn't hold over it. And then I talked briefly about hey, this sort of looks like what did I compare this to? I don't even remember. It goes to show it's been a long day, so did I compare that to? Oh, is this one? I think it was this, where the market sort of went flat and then like took a leg down, basically. Yeah, it was probably that. But okay, so like what's going on now? What do I think the market's doing? What's my base case? I actually don't. So I wasn't that surprised by this nuke. I mentioned yesterday, like we could go sideways for a while. It could be sideways for a month or two. It could be sideways for 8 months or 10 months. And by the way, I also realized after someone sent me this on Zoocap. Yo, what's up, Crypto Chef? Someone sent me this on Zoocap, which is like you can put this entire live stream into Perplexity and you look at a summary. But anyways, look, we dumped back out. I'm not totally surprised. You know, we basically kind of rejected this yearly open. And now we're sort of sitting at this 86 level. Question is, what's next? And you have to ask yourself a couple things. So, like, what is... So I'll go a couple ways. One is, like, I'm going to take a look at order books. I'm going to show you the order books and sort of how I'm interpreting them. The second is I'm going to look at like other indicators of froth versus no froth and so forth, like and liquidation maps and whatnot. So, okay, Bitcoin dumped here. What's going on? Let's look at the order books. I think those are the most interesting. And the order book picture has like significantly changed actually in comparison to what we saw lower. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you look at the order books, Binance Spot is basically bit stacked all the way down to 80, right? Coinbase is much more bid heavy, but you know it's not like an insane bid heaviness. But the key sort of here to notice is like the ask side on both Binance Spot, Coinbase Spot is basically like void, right? And so again, like moving forward, I think as we go down, you're just gonna get essentially what's going on here, from my interpretation, just looking at order books, just looking at everything else, is you have people who are selling for a variety of reasons, right? Yearly open, just like technical level sellers, tax sellers, people who think it's over. And essentially you have spot just sitting there and saying like, okay, come into our bids, right? We think Bitcoin's cheap at 85, 83, 81, come into our bids. And so I don't think there's actually that much leverage in the market. I don't think this is like a it's all over situation. I just think this is like natural chop, what's going on, and it could, like I say, it could take 2 months, it could take 10 months. Super low time frame. Let's look at the liquidation maps if HyperDash wants to load. Alrighty. So The lick maps definitely show that there are some apes that are long. You're seeing sort of like I would interpret this in two ways. There's definitely some apes that are long, right? Like, if we go down $8,000, there's about 2,500 BTC in licks. I don't think it's anything too crazy. Like, there's probably people who are leverage longing close to the price, which is what we're seeing here. Like, the density of all these ticks. There's quite a few of these leverage apes. But you are also starting to see some like stupid shorts enter the market. So from a lick map perspective on Bitcoin, it looks like maybe retail is like slightly more long heavy, which makes sense. Like we dipped, people are trying to buy that dip. Let's look. I want to look at like some of the other coins, like Altcoin and whatnot, just to see like, hey, are there any super degen longs? Not particularly. Like you just have like a pocket of long licks on something like a Altcoin, but it's nothing too crazy. I know on ETH you have that one whale who's mega long. We could take a look at ETH. Yeah, with ETH that guy's lick is like 2,000 or so. And another lick at like 2,600. So you have like one-off apes, but it's nothing too crazy, which is sort of... Sorry, I didn't mean to hit Bitcoin. I meant to type in Solana. By the way, again, if people have questions, anything they want me to go over, please go for it. So, again, similar with Solana, right? Like you have a mega whale whose lick is like 166, and then you have a bunch of like rando longs. Nothing too crazy in size, but you do have like quite a bit of longs, like some who get liquidated essentially on every tick. So nothing too crazy to see here. So in terms of looking at price, and then I'm going to start looking at some other indicators too. What's sort of my base case? I think it's just going to be like chop. It's going to be sideways chop. You might not end up getting a straight line down. You might just end up getting like, chop here. Maybe it trends down. Maybe it stays flat. Hell, at some point, maybe it even goes back up. But my thesis from yesterday completely holds. Like, yeah, we teleported down like $4,000 or whatever, but I don't think it's anything too crazy. And we go down to 82 next, based off the lick maps. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, like the lick maps would tell you maybe we have a bit more room to go down. Could we go down to 78? Yeah, maybe. But in terms of like a zoomed out like super trend, I think it's still pretty active. I still think it's totally fine. And look, like at the end of the day, you have a combination of ETFs and Sailor who have continued to absorb a lot of supply. I see a lot of people like fudding about Sailor, like, oh look, Sailor bought at 92 and the price ended up coming down. I don't think it's as big of a concern because he's not going to get liquidated, right? Like he could get liquidated in 2 years or 3 years, but it's not like Sailor's going to get liquidated tomorrow, right? So he's absorbing a lot of the sell pressure out of this market. And in a market that's already very deleveraged, like it just means that your downside's way more capped. Like if this guy's somehow raising like, he's bought $1 billion the last 2 weeks. Let's say he buys an average of $1 billion a month in the next few months, and then also ETFs maybe get going again, which we know ETFs will eventually get going again. Just means our downside's pretty hampered. So like, is it, like I said, is it 82? Is it 78? Is it 74? I'm not sure, but what is it? Sorry, I'm still new to live streaming on YouTube, so I'm looking some stuff here as I'm doing this. So like, I'm not too worried about the market, honestly. I know some people are fudding, it's over, it's a bear market. Like, we've seen these situations before. Like, maybe not with this level of extreme buying at the top. Like, in the past when we've seen these situations, you haven't seen the level of like, for the lack of a better word, mental illness level of treasury buying. I use a different word, but I want to get banned on here. If it was on Kick, I'd use it. But this was quite a bit of mental illness in terms of like treasury buying and people with their egos and whatnot. But we've seen these sorts of pullbacks like all the way up, right? Like we had some nice moves to 30K, and then we had like a dump and a lot of sideways, right? Like You know, we had a big pump to 74, and then we had like a ton of sideways. Now, I'm not even that worried. Like, I should say this too. Like, I'm not even worried that like, oh, 93, we're not going to trade above this yearly open, because there was plenty of times in 2024 where, you know, you started a downtrend. For example, here, right? Like, I specifically remember this. We start this downtrend in like early June of last year, and then like it continues, and then we base out for a while, and then Germany selling comes in, and blah blah blah. Germany selling, it's all over, you know, whatever, dumps out, and then no one thinks we can go all the way back up, which we do. Like, we go all the way back up to 70. So looking at Bitcoin here and thinking like, oh, it's going to be impossible for us to get above 94. Like, I just don't think that's very, what's the word? I don't think that's the way you should be thinking about this market. Like I said, you know, if you really trust the lick maps, if that's the one indicator you put a lot of weight in, and these lick maps have been more accurate than not, you could look and say like, hey, like maybe it's more likely we go down to 82 or whatever. But again, like in terms of a broader market, in terms of who's going to be the next big seller, like I just don't see it. So I think like when you think about this market, which something I was sort of saying yesterday, like I think this is relatively cheap in terms of Bitcoin's price. So when you think about the market here, it's like, okay, my downside's limited. It could be 10%, it could be 20%. It's probably not, and I'm not speaking in the case that Saylor blows up. I mean, he could blow up. Like, at some point he's gonna have issues, right? Unless Bitcoin's way higher and then he pushes those issues down the road. But at some point he's gonna have issues, but we know that's not gonna be in the next year. So until you get a situation like that that sort of plays out, where like Saylor is actually under pressure, to me, like chop that max downside 10 or 20%. At some point you can get another narrative, right? Now the narratives flying are like Bitcoin. What's the word? I'm actually looking up something, so I'm kind of curious. You know, Bitcoin inflation hedge or blah blah blah. Like right now, you're getting this sort of like bleedy price action, weak relatively speaking, whatever. Like not a big deal. I think like Bitcoin again at a 1.7 trillion market cap isn't that unreasonable. Like silver is double that. Gold is what, like 15 times that, right? And you're also like discounting the fact that a lot of the supply has been, you know, is not even available. One, because of lost coins, but two, because of treasury buying, three, because of ETF buying, four, because of entities that just hodl, right? So when you look at the like big landscape, and some people are saying, oh, this sell-off is due to Wintermute. It could very well be like, from my experience, and I'll sort of tell you guys a story from, earlier this year. Like these sorts of, like typically what happens is, you know, there might be someone smart out there. Let me rephrase. Someone might have sold here, or someone might have sold here, but essentially, like what from my experience talking with institutions, the thinking or the way these institutions approach the market is more like, what is this? The bit rate is lower than recommended. Okay, I don't know what the hell that is. We'll figure that out later. Okay. Shit, and that derailed my train of thought here. Sorry, saying like if how the way institutions think, they might have sold here, they might have sold here. These guys are not like, they're smart people who are just like, okay, I'm gonna buy anytime there's a big sell off, right? So if this goes to 82 or 78, the spot order books are telling you someone's there to absorb. But in terms of like the way I've noticed these institutions think, like I've told this story before, not on the YouTube, just because I started streaming here, but you know, I talked to an institution who sold, I want to say somewhere in this range. I don't know where. They sold like mid to high 90s, let's put it that way. And Bitcoin was trading sort of at low 80s. Again, I'm talking an institution with 9 figures. Like literally, these guys can put on 9-figure trades. without batting an eyelash. And these guys have put on these sorts of trades. And I was basically like telling this guy, like, dude, like, you know, I think it kind of makes sense to buy, like, get bullish here. And he was telling me like, well, I've been through the 2008 financial crisis. This is how you lose like your portfolio, blah blah blah. And essentially, he was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. So he might have looked like a genius here, but I don't know whether he ended up rebuying up here or what he did. So my point being is like, you're going to get these one-off sellers. There's not that many of them, but there are some. These discretionary sellers, they're going to go one by one. Eventually, you're going to run out of sellers. You have smart money that's absorbing the supply, and at some point, it's going to go up. So who knows how long this is going to take? I will say one comparable I was thinking about, and I need to think about it more, was 2019, when you got this huge run up to 14K, essentially due to the plus token scam. And then when the plus token thing sort of they stopped buying, you sort of got this like downward drift, right? And in fact, like this leg was that plus token leg unwinding. But you got this sort of downward drift. But Bitcoin ultimately was like settled significantly higher than it did. And what am I doing? Go to like a daily. All right, here we go. Bitcoin ultimately settled way higher than it did where it was consolidating for months, like earlier on, right? So, and then ultimately we got like a mega leverage buildup in the COVID crash, whatever. But that's sort of how I think about the market now. And like, the market's pretty deleveraged. We're probably closer to a low than a high. Maybe 5% downside, maybe 10% downside. Have I gone over lick maps? Yes, I did, but I'll go over them again. I'm happy to go over anything. Like, I really don't mind. So, when I look at everything, it's like, we could go lower, right? And let's just pull up the lick maps again. Why not? Lick maps say that retail is probably a bit more long than short, right? I don't think these lick maps are anything too crazy, actually. Like, I do think it's telling you that there is a long bias in the market. I don't think you're seeing like crazy ass shit that you saw in the past. I think this is like super different than what it looked like at like 92K or 90s, like 92K on the way down last month. So yeah, there's probably like a bit of room to hunt people, but is it like omega huntable? Like, I don't think so. I'm gonna see if I can pull up the open interest charts. Actually, let's see. 1 second. Should load now. Look at open interest. Like, I'm gonna pull up two open interest things. I'm gonna pull up global, and I'm gonna pull up stablecoin margin. Nothing too crazy. If anything, when I look at this global OI, it kind of looks like people have been shorting into this low, which kind of lends back to my thesis of like, hey, I think we're more likely to chop than anything else type deal. So again, there's no obvious sign of leverage buildup. There's no obvious sign of mega froth. Sellers are probably more in control now in the sense that, yeah, you're not gonna have like, besides, like, if you think about it from this perspective of who's the buy side, it's gonna be the ETF at some point. The ETF hasn't really come fully online. Like, the ETF buyers haven't really reappeared yet. They could take some time to reappear, no problem. And like, in terms of who's willing to top blast, like, you don't have as many people in terms of like treasuries and whatnot that want to top blast right now, besides sailors. So there's no. If someone came up to me and said like, hey, I have cash, I want crypto exposure, should I buy right now? I'd say like, yeah, like, get some exposure at these prices. That's what I would personally say to, like, let's say a family member. Like, hey, 86 is pretty good. If you don't want to deploy all, don't. I totally get it. But if you want to deploy half of it here, yeah, go for it. Like, I don't think it's unreasonable. But so you have like sellers that are sort of like, for one reason or another, one person's gonna capitulate or another person's gonna capitulate, and eventually like this capitulation process is gonna play out, and there's not gonna be many sellers left. Very similar to like February, March, April of this past year, right? Like sellers were sort of in control, right? Like lower high, like we can literally see it lower high, a bunch of lower highs here, like some rando wick high, some lower highs here. Sellers were in control, like, and buyers were content even buying lower lows, but eventually, what ended up happening is like the market ends up breaking out because you don't have any sellers left. So this could play out. It could be a longer version of this, kind of similar to like March, November, April. Sorry. What am I saying? March, November, April. March to October, November of last year. So that's roughly my summary. Happy to take questions here. Happy to see what people want me to go over. Basically, I think Bitcoin's cheap. Could see some more selling just based from like randos. Don't think sailors are risk. And yeah, I think like in situations where and again, everyone can come to their own judgment, but in situations where you think the downside's limited, kind of makes more sense to just have exposure than not. That's basically what I'm trying to say here. All right, let's go over some questions here. If you look at heat maps for some coins like Hype, is very concentrated on the long side. Yeah, actually, if you looked at these lick maps right before 1010, they were almost all very concentrated on the long side. I think Hype is one of these cases, and I've talked about this. Jeremy Grantham talks about this actually, which is sorry, one second. Jeremy Grantham basically talks about this, where it's like people pay top PEs like and high multiple, like you pay for high earnings and a high multiple on the earnings at tops, and you pay for low multiples of earnings on low earnings at the bottom, right? So I think there's a lot of people who sort of put on this hype trade and basically just thought this was a one-way trade to the moon, and unfortunately for them, like the reality is that hype is like, in situations like this where retail is sort of getting rinsed nonstop, like hype is actually like hype volume was high because of the situation that the market was in. If you look at like a DeFi llama of hyperliquid volumes, it's actually just been going down only. Santa Rally doesn't look great. Yeah, I mean, if anything, I think going into end of year, like you're more likely to get tax selling than you are to get like a mega Santa Rally. Not to say you don't get like squeezes up and whatnot, but I would say it's probably more likely you trend a little bit down than you trend a little bit to the upside. Any other questions? Anything anyone wants me to go over? Like I said, I know the timing's a little bit bad, and also, there's not that much going on. I mean, Bitcoin went from 90 to 86, like whatever. Not the end of the world. Nothing too crazy. I mean, I should say this too. There's one thing I didn't talk about, which is if you do want a sense of like, oh, has the market really flushed out? Like, look at some altcoins. I think that's sort of like a good indicator in terms of like where the market's at. There's going to be exceptions, right? Like Farcoin's clearly well off its lows, but a good explanation for that was Wintermute. But if you look at something like an Aster, a coin that I got as high as $1.40 like a month ago, Aster is basically sitting at what, like new lows, right? It wasn't trading this low on November 4th or whatever. So like, you look at something like a pump, new lows. So this to me again, it's like Solana basically sitting at the lows, right? So when I look at like all these other coins, there's exceptions, right? Like ETH, like Farcoin, XPL, new low. I mean, this coin's like doom pill of death. That to me again is telling me like this is the cleansing. Like this is the cleansing, and this is like actually closer to the end than the beginning of the cleansing. Now, like from the perspective of magnitude, that's why I said I think downside is just limited here. Like I don't see the argument for why we're gonna like hyper nuke straight to zero or whatever. All right. Someone pointed out that all these exchange tokens usually end at zero, and hype was really no different. Um, the issue with hype is the market cap is so high, and the question is, can they sustain that much volume in an environment where people just don't have money, right? Like, that's the issue with hype. And like when you look at the way they handle liquidations and all this other stuff, like there are just better ways of there's better platforms. I'm not sure if I can say the name on YouTube, but the platform that has 1000x, they're actually way less predatory than like Hyperliquid when it comes to liquidations. That's one thing that people don't really account for is like all these platforms. Like I might be wrong about this, but my gut feeling is people just like ape into a position and then like they just see what their lick price is, but they don't do like the back of the envelope math to see like what's the difference between my true lick price and the lick price that's showing on the exchange. So, for example, if you're 100x long Bitcoin at 100k, your true lick price where your margin should hit zero is 99k, right? So if you took that 100x long on the 1000x exchange, I'll just say the name Rollbit, like it doesn't matter. If you took a 100x long on Rollbit at 100k, your lick would be 99. But if you took that same long on, I don't know, pick a rando exchange, your lick would be 99.5, right? And that delta, all that margin is going to the exchange, right? So these are sort of things that you have to think about as a trader, and I think a lot of people don't. And when you look at Hyperliquid, with the way they allow some people to do some crazy ass shit, they're pretty predatory on that. So I like this timing, lol. Well, maybe if people like the timing, I'll keep up the timing. Are you at all concerned about quantum or any of that FUD? No, I don't really care about it. I don't think it's meaningful. I use that website you have in your bio for X for 1000X. Well, I'm glad. I don't know if you're on my wet juice box. If you're on my ref, let me know. Send me a DM on Twitter. If not, I'll just because I don't think that I'm also trying to get them to revamp their affiliate and whatnot, but obviously that's going to take a little bit of time and no guarantees. But if I can get them to do that, and you do use them, I'd love to give you a kickback. So. Any other questions? Anything anyone else wants me to go over? I'm not sure if what I'm even talking about is interesting or not, to be honest. So if it isn't, also let me know. Follow you on there. I was choosing between roll and hyper. Went with roll. Yeah, I mean, Rollbit, like if essentially Rollbit's model is so the model for most of these exchanges, and again, Hyperliquid's one of the most predatory, is if you bet $100 on a 100x, so you have a $10,000 position. If price goes up 1%, you get to win the full $100, right? But what these exchanges, you get to win $100, right? So you double your money. But if the price goes down 0.5%, you get wiped out. Like I'm just using the 0.5% number as like an estimate, but so it's very asymmetric, right? Like, okay, if we assume price is random and I'm in a 100x position, half the time I lose, and let's just say it's like 50% chance that it goes down 0.5%, 50% chance that it goes up 0.5%. you're looking at a super asymmetric payoff curve. Rollbits is, hey, we're gonna take, 10 to 20%. If you use P&L fee, we're gonna take 10 or 20% off the top, but the liquidations on both sides are actually symmetric, right? So if price goes down 1%, you lose your 100. If price goes up 1%, you gain 90 cents, right? So from that perspective, it's actually quite balanced. Anything else anyone wants me to go over? By the way, if you guys aren't subscribed to my YouTube, please feel free to go for it. It's totally free, as you may imagine, and would be much appreciated. Also, how do you guys like YouTube versus Kick? I don't know if there's any difference in terms of like content itself, but I will say it was easier to set up Kick, but I feel like YouTube has more. YouTube's smoother, but I might be totally wrong. You monitor USDT dominance at all? I do like to monitor how much they're printing because I do view it as like a sense of liquidity, right? Like it's kind of like the equivalent of M2 money supply, but it's actually much more direct. Like if you have a shitload of stables in the market, like at some like price has a floor, right? So I think the total stables number is like 300 billion or something. So and it's gone up a lot, right? Like you can go look at a stablecoin chart, it's gone up a shitload. Those stables aren't, maybe some of them have come out, right? Like USDE, if I'm not mistaken, some USDC, but for the most part, that liquidity is like some of it is sticking in the market, which is why I think like this sort of super cycle is going to continue. And what's that super cycle? It's this trend that started in January and it's just like going straight up, right? If you do YouTube streams, I can clip your streams to see if you need Flipper. Interesting. All right. Well, that's good to know. Anything else anyone wants me to go over? Been a long day on my end, so happy to go over any questions or anything anyone wants me to talk about. If not, we can sort of call it a wrap. I mean, look, I would say this, like, anticipate the market is slower, anticipate that you might have days where things don't move that much. You could get plus minus 5% days or whatever. Not going to be the same wild, wild west it was, let's say, like a year ago. That is for sure. What are your thoughts on the quantum threat to Bitcoin? So it's a good question. I probably should do more research to be honest, but as far as I'm aware, and I'm not an expert in quantum computing theory and whatnot, but just because, okay, from my understanding, and I could be wrong, is you know, just because a problem is solvable in some sort of polynomial time doesn't necessarily mean that it's solvable with any reasonable speed, right? Like you could have huge coefficients in terms of the runtime. So I'm not even sure that it's a complete threat. And as far as I'm aware, we're nowhere close to sort of like the point where things are gonna break down. So Any other questions? Anything anyone else wants me to go over? And once again, if you guys aren't subscribed, would be super appreciated to drop a subscribe, totally free. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. I think I'm gonna call it a wrap. It's been a 40-minute live stream, and not too much going on. I wouldn't be that surprised if I. Okay, I'd be surprised if I wake up and prices like at 80. Wouldn't be surprised if I wake up and it's 184 or something. I really wouldn't be surprised even if I wake up and it's whipsawed back above 90. Like, I think both of these possibilities are feasible, and so nothing too crazy. I don't think there's anything too crazy to see here. I just think like overall, relatively speaking, the price is cheap. So zoomed out, I think things look good. Low time frame, who knows? Doesn't really matter. The key is just to accumulate here in these sorts of situations. Just like the key was to accumulate once you had a big wipeout here. The key was to accumulate all of last year, right? The key was to accumulate when price went to 26K, despite like half of CT wanting to short this shit. So, yeah, just something to keep in mind, I suppose. But let's print another bar to the upside and a bar to the downside. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like my assumption is that that's actually not that, quite likely. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. Do you see any bulls left on the timeline? I haven't been looking too hard. I should do a little recap of all my counter indicators and let you guys know next stream. So, as far as I'm aware, not particularly though. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna call it a wrap. Once again, appreciate everyone hopping on, and until next time, thank you again. And just if you're not subscribed, feel free to subscribe. And if you have any feedback, by the way, that comes up later that you think about, just send me a DM on Twitter. So, anyways, guys, thank you so much, and until next time, take care.